Always great to catch up with Robe Howe from Diabetics Doing Things podcast and so many other things in the diabetes community. You become the go-to MC. I see you all over the place at virtual events. Thanks for jumping on. It's great to talk to you again.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I've become what I call, and literally no one else says this except me, I'm the host with the most insulin on board. So that's my official moniker.
Oh, I'm going to steal that the next time I introduce you. I'll make sure to say that.
Please do. Please do.
Host with the most. I love it. Well, listen, we've got a lot to talk about today. I wanted to start off by just jumping in because the latest thing for you really has been not a change of technology. You've been a Medtronic guy for a long time, but you've got the latest version of Medtronic's pump. So tell me, when did you start using the 770?
Yeah, so I am very fortunate. I've worked with Medtronic for a long time, and I've been a patient of Medtronic for even longer. So today, as of recording, it's December 16th, and I think I've been on the Medtronic 770G now since December 1st, or right around there. So I was in the first wave of Medtronic folks, employees, ambassador group to get access to the new pump, and it's exciting. I mean, I think for me, I've been on the 670G now for almost 3 years. So, one of the criticisms of the new pump is that it really isn't very different from a technological standpoint, except it does have what we've always been very critical. And I mean, we as the diabetes greater community of the 670 was that there was no Bluetooth connectivity to the phone. So I think this is Medtronic's response to say, hey, we hear you, we got to have Bluetooth connectivity. And it's great. It actually, the app is super intuitive, the MiniMed mobile app, and it has basically your sensor glucose like you would normally see on your pump display, but it also has your 24-hour time and range. So just a quick little swipe, you can get over there and see your 24-hour numbers, which is kind of nice, especially if you've had a really good day. You can see that, those high time and range numbers. So it's exciting. And, I think for people who are, really into the nitty gritty, it's also a new transmitter for the sensors. So it's still the Guardian 3 sensor, but a new GL3 transmitter, which just has a few of the, annoying calibration tweaks that some people have, I think more vocal people than I have for sure lamented. So the new transmitter is excellent and has fixed a lot of the challenges from the early days.
We talked to Medtronic a couple of weeks ago, and I'll link up that episode in the show notes here to go through all of the features and what's coming next. And, talking to you, Rob, is more of a personal kind of course, using it. But it really is interesting how so often these companies, and it's not just Medtronic, I would kind of compare it to Omnipod Dash, right? So they have one version, then they almost have a stopgap, which has some improvements, but isn't the big shiny thing that we're waiting for, if you're looking at the technology so carefully, which will be the 780, which is out in Europe and will be out soon. But, I have heard a couple of people who've used Medtronic for a long time, like you have, say, the phone stuff would be nice, but I don't really need it. And now that you have it, you really look at it more. I mean, I don't have diabetes, and so I'm trying to get myself from following Benny so often to not looking at it 24/7. But was it really that different for you to kind of just look at your phone more than your pump?
It's a good question. And I think you're right. Your assessment is spot on. Right now, I'm operating mostly from home. So there isn't a, work meeting where I would, feel better about pulling the phone out versus taking the pump out of my, pocket. And I am a insulin pump in the pocket person. So I don't wear like a holster or anything like that. And obviously Medtronic pumps have tubing. So, I think it would help me, maybe save me an interaction or two a year, maybe just to have it on the phone. But I think it's nice to just be able to, you're on the phone all day anyway. I'll admit I spend a lot of time on my phone, and being able to click over in the night. I think that's been the time that I've used the app the most when, when I'm laying in bed. Sure.
I feel like you misunderstood. Or maybe I didn't say it right. I think it's huge to have it on the phone. And
no, sure.
I don't want to counteract what you're saying, but like my kid is a pump in the pocket kid too. And he would never look at it if he didn't have to. He's on the phone, and you say maybe a couple interactions. It would be really a big deal if he suddenly lost that, which he hasn't even had for that long.
Right.
It's funny what you get used to.
Exactly. And I think that's where I think as consumers, and this is sort of my, before getting more and learning more about what goes into diabetes technology from a FDA approval standpoint and all of the sort of hurdles that they have to go through, I was sitting there streaming a movie on my iPhone on an airplane, and I'm like, wow, if I can stream a movie on my iPhone on an airplane, we for sure should be able to look at blood sugar numbers on a phone. But I'm very much like Benny. I love the phone, very familiar with the interface. I use it quite a bit. So I think, in terms of having that convenience is just so nice. It kind of just takes away, and I think Medtronic has really done a nice job in past years and also going forward of really relieving that mental burden and making diabetes integrated into your life. And this is definitely something that makes diabetes just more integrated in the way that you already use technology, the way that you're already on your phone. And I can get a push notification now. If my alert on high, if I'm, I got my high alert set at 160, get the alert on high, it pops up in my phone, just like a normal notification, and I can take care of it then. So yeah, I really love it. And I think that's kind of like what you said with Benny, you get really used to it really quickly of having it there and having those numbers all the time. So it's just nice to have it a little bit more integrated into our everyday life.
Are you a big auto mode guy? Do you use the features of the 670 and now the 770?
I am. I stan auto mode. I'm a big auto mode guy. And I think the criticisms that I see of it online are fair, and it's not perfect. And I think Medtronic has done a great job of talking about those. Initially, this was like 1.0 of the hybrid closed loop systems. So the algorithm is now in the technology world is a little dated. But now, like you said, you mentioned 780 coming soon in the US. The next version of that I think is really exciting. But for me, yeah, I'm an auto mode guy. And I think the biggest example I'll give for listeners is I love to play golf. I have a weekly golf round that I play on Sunday mornings, and I set it on auto mode. And before auto mode, I would go out and, my basal would be what it was. And I have to set a temp target or a temp basal. And, even before CGMs, I just basically have to have gummy bears stashed in my golf bag. And on auto mode, thankfully, I go in with no insulin on board in the morning. If my morning starts off really smooth, then I can go through my entire round walking or in the cart and not have to worry about correcting and not have to worry about high. So it's really nice. I love auto mode. That blue shield gives me a lot of confidence.
That's awesome. It's funny though, looking at, as we're recording this on video, I can see into your house. There's basketball stuff all over the place. Now I know you're a big basketball player. We've talked about that when we talked in the past. So I'm interested that you brought up golf rather than basketball there.
Well, I'm aging gracefully, Stacey.
I was going to say, I didn't know you played golf.
I think I still love playing basketball. And I think that's one thing that, sentimentally, I think there's been so many terrible things that have been taken from us because of COVID. And the thing that's been really eaten away at my heart and my soul is not being able to play basketball. And because it's just not safe. And I think in Dallas, especially, we have so many cases, and I've been able to do some training in a gym by myself wearing a mask, but I just miss competing. And I think golf, you're competing against yourself. So it kind of scratches my itch a little bit. So that's been my COVID pivot.
That's awesome. I've been playing golf since I was 22. So I'll take you out sometime when we can.
I'm ready. Say no more. I'm ready.
One of the things that really made me smile in the last couple of weeks was that terrific video you posted. It was announcing the partnership you have with Medtronic now, but the video itself was so great. It was, if you haven't seen it, we'll link it up. But how would you describe that? Like an athlete grabbing a sponsorship or getting recruited for a team?
Yeah, I was stuck on this concept of signing day, and this announcement kind of felt like that. And for me, I've worked with Medtronic for a number of years as an ambassador, as a consultant, and now kind of deepening that partnership into a more formal role. It just came to mind, and I thought, this is true to who I am as an athlete, and seems like a fun way and that's a big part of what we're working on together is, doing some outside the box, maybe not traditional Medtronic type announcements. And I would classify this as sort of in that realm. And I am just very fortunate that my team in Medtronic is so on board with hearing sort of outside the box ideas. And so getting to produce this fake press conference about my signing day and learning that there are no Medtronic hats and having to get a Medtronic hat made for me to put on. So now I have like the one of one Medtronic hat, which I love. It was really cool, and the response was great. And again, I'm glad that my team didn't roll their eyes at the pitch. They were like, "Oh yeah, this actually sounds great. We'll do this." And I can only imagine legal, as it went through legal, what legal was thinking of just reviewing that video. So very fun.
That is funny. I think I have one of the remaining Animus shirts left in existence from when I used to do appearances for them.
Yeah, you gotta save that merch. It's like, it's retro,
That's really funny.
I'm very excited about the integration of the phone as the software backend to the pumps and the devices. I think that adding diabetes technology to the Internet of Things is a huge milestone in healthcare. It's a huge milestone for people with diabetes, and it's just going to make this whole user experience more intuitive. I think the DIY loop community has shown how powerful it can be when technology and people helping each other and really dialing in features that they need and that are important, and working with some of these larger manufacturers, I think kind of opened up this Pandora's box of questions for these bigger companies to ask themselves. Hey, are our technologies right for our customers? Are we meeting them where they are? And I'm sure, as you encountered in your conversations with Medtronic, that's a big focus for them right now, is meeting patients with diabetes where they are. So, you've seen this year now the acquisition of Companion Medical to bring multiple daily injections into the Medtronic suite, which previously they were a pump company. And I think now they're really focusing themselves on being a diabetes technology company, which is cool. And I think is good for patients, good for Medtronic, good all around.
Well, and it's interesting because for years, people were saying, the stuff's got to look better. You live with it. It's on your body. You want it to look less like a medical device. And there was a lot of pushback from people within the community as well as on the technical side who were saying, who cares? Just make it work better. And I think we are at a place now and a point now where there is enough, even though there seems to be fewer pump companies, there's enough competition that they do have to look good. They do have to feel better. I mean, I don't remember what you used when you were first diagnosed, but it's changed a lot in the almost 14 years that Benny's been using an insulin pump. It's not a brick anymore.
Right. It doesn't have a Game Boy screen. It doesn't look like a calculator. I think all that really comes down to me is just user experience in general. And you look at iPhone, for example, and the transformative qualities that piece of technology has had on society in general. And I think that is sort of the gold standard now, and that filters down to healthcare companies. Something that we talk about in my agency world is that, most people, when they think of competition, they think of, immediately in their industry, their top 2 or 3 competitors. So, but for consumers, they don't look at it necessarily that way. They're looking at you online as your competition is Apple and Chase and Amazon. And if your online experience, if your device experience doesn't mirror those and isn't on par with those companies, which is really unfair for a lot of businesses, a lot of brands, because they don't have the ability or the scale or the infrastructure to deploy at that level. But if you're not on par with those companies, users will tune out. They're looking for best in class. So I think that's been a big shift for all the major diabetes technology companies. And I think outside of diabetes as well.
I'm very excited to see what the next year or two bring, because we were supposed to get new stuff this year, but with COVID, obviously things got pushed. But I think it's going to be a really interesting couple of years from the tech side.
I'm very excited about it.
Yeah, it's good stuff. All right, let's move on to one of those other issues. You and I saw a conversation online that we wanted to talk about, and I think this was mostly on Twitter, where the word disabled or disability, it's interesting when using that with diabetes, because Benny was diagnosed before he was 2. And all I heard for those first few years was he can do anything. It's not going to stop him. But then you get to school and it's like he needs a 504 plan because he has a disability and he's covered. I have my own take on it. And I'm curious what you think as the person who lives with diabetes. Is that a bad word for you?
That's really interesting. Seeing that conversation, I think I want, first of all, people to know that I see both sides. I think I see people who argue on one side or the other. You were seen. And I think for me, it's very similar to your story with Benny. I was told from the get-go, from the jump, that whatever dreams you have for your life are still within reach. I have perpetuated that idea at the beginning of all of my talks, all of my messaging. I believe I'm living proof that you can do things with diabetes if you want to and take care of yourself. I mean, there's other factors involved, obviously, but at the same time, I think denying the fact that you're disabled denies all the hard work that you put into your life to stay alive every day. And let's be honest, I think none of us would put the amount of work, mental, physical, financial, into anything else that we put into diabetes without compensation, expected compensation or some sort of like just reward, And I think that's really where it nails home for me, is like, if you factually, like scientifically, under the Americans with Disabilities Act, under the ADA, people with diabetes have a disability. that doesn't mean that you can't do the things that you want to do, but it also doesn't mean that you're not disabled. And what really reinforced this for me was a few months ago, there is a documentary on Netflix called Pistorius, which is about Oscar Pistorius, the Olympian who was born with defects in his legs, and he runs on the Nike blades, the legs that allow disabled runners to run. And he competed not only in the Paralympic Games, but also against non-disabled athletes. But in this documentary, and obviously tragically, he murdered his girlfriend or killed his girlfriend, and is on permanent house arrest, I believe. It was so interesting to see the rhetoric by which he referred to his situation, his disability. And he's like, I don't identify as disabled.
Yeah.
And that was something that I think in the early years of my life with diabetes, when I was a younger man, less gray hair, but I identified with that. I was like, I don't want people to treat me differently. I want to show them that I can do this. But when you deny that disability, again, when you close yourself off from things like diabetes community, when you close yourself off from benefits like your 504, when you close yourself off to identifying as disabled or taking advantage, God forbid you don't take advantage of the concessions that have been granted to you because of the struggle and the burden that you're carrying because of this disease, I think you close yourself off to all the work that you're doing. And that's really where, I want people to know that, like, hey, yeah, I at face value am a fit, athletic, successful, quote unquote, successful person with diabetes, but I very much identify with own your disability. Yeah. That doesn't make you, and I think there's a lot of conversations about ableism that I think we as a culture need to do better about, because I think you alienate people who are disabled by saying, well, I don't identify as disabled, or I have a disability, but I'm not disabled. I think those are negative, negatively affect people who, really identify as disabled. So I want to say, like, Robe Howe, professional athlete, the guy who goes and speaks and is like, oh, you can do whatever you want. I identify as disabled. I am disabled. I have a disability. And that doesn't mean that I'm not going to wake up tomorrow, and if my blood sugar is high, I'm just going to quit and be like, you know what, sayonara, team. But what it does mean is that I see you out there struggling. The burden and chronic, burden of diabetes is taxing. I feel you, I see you, and I think it's better for all of us to just work harder on accepting the fact that with diabetes, you have a disability that allows you some advantages and allows you access to some things that people without this disability don't have access to. And to deny yourself that is, I think, a disservice to yourself.
Yeah. It's such an interesting topic because you really centered on what bothers me the most about it. And that is that as a society, we look down on disabled people in our language, in our actions. It's just baked in. And it's come out so much better in the last few years that we're even able to talk about it. Even in the elections, I never thought about that, how we don't even make it equal access for people with disabilities. And so there's this whole society burden of not wanting to admit that we have anything wrong with us, because then we're stigmatized. It's not even just diabetes. But I also think that, trying to raise a child with type 1, Benny would never say, I don't think he would say even today, and it's his voice is not mine to speak for, but I don't think he would say I have a disability. I don't think he would raise his hand like you were doing. But I do think that he should, because all of the fights that have gone before, it's easier. It's not easy. It's never easy, but it's easier to be a elementary school kid or a middle school kid now with a pump or a CGM and with all the education and with a 504 than it would have been in the 70s or the 80s when a kid was doing shots and couldn't leave to go to the bathroom. And we've heard all these horrible stories, or an employee back then who wasn't protected. And so because and I will say he's had it easier because he has a lot of access and a lot of privilege, these words that we throw around, but he really does. He's got me as his mother with a big mouth and a microphone. But also, I guess what I'm trying to say is all that work that went into protecting people with disabilities, as you said, is really important to honor now. And to understand that, if you're a cashier, and this happened in North Carolina and in other states, like if you're a cashier at the Piggly Wiggly and you need to treat your low blood sugar with juice, and they won't let you, you're covered. You're not going to lose your job. You're going to get paid back. And that's
Right.
the kind of coverage that I think we need to think more about. But I will tell you a funny story about how I didn't help Benny. And you can judge me on this one. So, and I stand by this. When we've gone to Disney World many times. Never been to Disneyland. We live on the East Coast, but we've been to Disney World many times. We've never used the disability pass or the guest assistance pass or whatever they call it. The reason is because when we first started talking about it, it was presented to us like a reward. Not that we needed it. It was like, oh, you have diabetes, you have this great thing and you can cut all the lines. And it wasn't presented to me as, hey, Benny might have a low blood sugar or might have a high blood sugar or, high situation, you might need it. And I said to myself, I'm a crazy Disney planner. Like I am good to go. We don't wait in lines whenever because I plan it. I love it. So we never did it. And I've talked about this. I was called out on it at a conference once. We were just having a casual conversation. And somebody in their 20s said to me, you're doing him a disservice because you're teaching him that he shouldn't take advantage of what's out there. And I said, well, he shouldn't because it's not a reward. And she said, it's not a reward. It's not like a golden ticket. It's there if he needs it. And if you don't need it, fine. But if he needs it when he goes, he shouldn't feel bad about using it. And she reframed the whole thing for me. And we still haven't had to use it. But I have definitely been less judgmental and kinder about other parents that I know who've used it. So if you're somebody that I've been snarky to, I apologize. That's my story, Rob.
I think that speaks to your capacity to learn, Stacey. I mean, we all, this would be shocking, probably not to no one, but we don't always make the right decision from the jump, and we learn new information and we reframe conversations. And, I'll piggyback on that. When I was younger, I was traveling a lot for basketball and I liked to get on the plane early because I was like, oh, I'm flying Southwest. I'm in the B section. I'm not going to get a great seat, but since I have diabetes, that's all good. I can go get whatever seat that I want. And then I stopped doing that. And I did that for a couple of reasons. I think consciously I would see people who needed real assistance to board the plane early. And I wanted to be respectful of their space. And whether it's a wheelchair access or, just extra medical supplies, I find that the accommodation that is made on airlines for people with diabetes is mostly to make sure that they can get their medical supplies nearby on the plane with them. And I, for the most part, my supplies, because I'm a dude, probably are always a smaller footprint than some of my lady counterparts with diabetes. And also maybe I'm just a little bit more of a free spirit and be like, hey, you know what? I'm going to be out of town for a week. I'm going to take 2 or 3 infusion sets and a couple of vials of insulin in my backpack, and we're going to go for it. So it was always close by to me anyway. And all that to say, I don't do it today, but I know it's an option. And if I feel like the flight is oversold or I'm going to have to make a quick connection and I want to make sure that my medicine is within reach, I will take advantage of it because I know it's there. And I think having that knowledge and being willing to accept that assistance, accept those accommodations, and knowing that space is available for you is positive.
Yeah. I mean, for me, as I have learned and changed my mind, and I probably will continue to, my philosophy is now, if you need it or think you might, take it. It's there to help you. If you think it's going to, if there's someone else who's more in need, if you don't need something, right? It's like parking in a handicapped spot when you really don't need it. You're driving your grandmother's car and it's got the ticket on it and you're just like, I'm in a hurry. Don't do that.
Right.
But if you need it, use it and don't be embarrassed or ashamed. And I hope all of it, I don't even know if I'm even saying this the right way.
I think you are. I think there is shame wrongfully pointed at people who look, and I think that's back to that sort of ableism narrative perpetuated in this country. You mentioned like the election. I'll give you another example. Governor Greg Abbott in Texas is in a wheelchair. There was an accident when he was a child and it caused him to be paralyzed from the waist down. So while I don't agree with a lot of the things that he does politically, I stay away. And there's been a very big movement online of people who disagree with him, staying away from the low-hanging fruit of making fun of his wheelchair and making fun of his disability, because that's not what makes him make poor decisions from a policy standpoint. Right. That's just the easiest, that's just like a kid. When you're young, kids point at the first different thing that they can see. And oftentimes that's very hurtful. But we are adults, and we can see that, that's unproductive. And I think, again, coming back to not alienating anyone who has a disability, it's more focusing on policy and actual, politics in the case of Governor Abbott, that are detrimental to what's going on here, not his disability. I think his disability is completely off of the ballot.
Yeah.
Or should be.
It should be. It really should be. And with diabetes, so much of what you all deal with is invisible, or, you're able to make it invisible. So it's even harder in some ways. So I don't know.
Well, and I mean, I think even on that point, there seemingly is a stigma to, letting your diabetes be shown. And I think there's a lot of people who share that they're now very proud of their CGMs. They're proud of their pump sites to wear them out. They're proud of sharing their numbers on social media. I get a lot of laughs from people sharing their 69 blood sugars with me. And, I think that sort of empowerment and saying, hey, I can be publicly facing with this, and there's a community with that, is great, because, look at me. I'm like the poster child for some of the negative achievement culture things around diabetes. I am a, handsome white guy who used to have a six pack and, got to play sports and lives his best life. And, he's not held down by his diabetes. And what you don't see are bloody sites and, all of the shit that, sorry for cursing. I know this is a family program, but that goes into your diabetes. And, all of the adhesive that you got to wipe off your arm after you change a site, or, the feeling of less than after you're at a pool party pre-COVID and your site got too wet and you got pulled out really easily and you have to go home, or just waking up on a vacation with a high blood sugar and it ruining your day. Like, those things don't always get shown. And I need to be better about sharing some of those low moments personally on our platforms. But, just because you don't look like a Olympic endurance champion with, Hollywood abs and a great tan and, living in your best life, always time in range at 100%. If that doesn't sound like you, that's super okay. And I see you. And that doesn't mean that your life with diabetes is less than. I think there's downsides, and I've benefited a lot from achievement culture and diabetes, but I'm an achiever. That's what I try. That's sort of wired into me. And, as I get older, I learn more about myself and why I do things. And I love following the rules. I love having a structure so I can try to achieve. That's just what speaks to me.
All right, wait, I need to ask you though.
Okay.
I love everything you've said. Achievement culture though. I'm not up on that as the world's worst diabetes mom. I mean, I'm all kidding, but I'm all about mistakes. And that's been my platform, and I mean, my brand, do I have to call it that? But that's truly how I parent. And I've never gone for more. What does achievement culture mean? Is that you can do anything, or I'm only showing the beautiful stuff, or what does that mean?
I think that's part of it. I'll reinforce something that I'm sure will speak to you in a way. Think about podcast guests. What's more interesting to someone who, like, at face value, we have two people. We've got a mom with 3 kids who gets her kids to school on time, lives with diabetes, and, is just juggling a regular life. Or we have, 2-time Olympian bobsledder who, has been around the world 50 times and, has been on the ESPN Body Issue or whatever the case.
Right.
Like, so at face value, as a journalist, who are you going to pick for the more juicy story?
Yeah, the bobsled guy, obviously.
The bobsled guy. And I don't know any type 1s that bobsled. So I think it's a good sport, because I'm not singling anybody out in particular. But I think as a diabetes community, I have also been guilty of, like, oh, I'm in this position where I can go speak, or I can have, people follow me and they follow the podcast, and I get these opportunities to represent people with diabetes. So I got into this sort of negative pattern of thinking where I was like, what do I have to do next? Like, what is my, I've already given my podcast talk to all these JDRF chapters. Well, they're not going to invite me back next year to give the same talk. I've got to do something else. I've got to achieve something else. So, like, right now, even the talk that I give is called From Professional Basketball Player to Professional Diabetic. And inherently in that title, while it is good and people click on it, is ableism. And it's like, oh, you're only worth speaking at these events if you achieve something crazy, like playing pro sports. And I think I'm really trying to be more aware and more, not cautious is the wrong word, but just more mindful of the things that I say and the things that I do that are rooted in an achievement culture that rewards extraordinary feats and also tends to erase living a normal life and making that unsuccessful.
I'm going to armchair psychologize on why it didn't resonate with me. Moms aren't allowed to have achievement culture. We are not allowed, and I'm using that term very loosely because screw it, I'll do whatever I want. You won't allow me. But truly, if my brand was the best diabetes mom, I got it right and you don't, or a professional mom, right? You're not going to see anybody talking about that because we don't talk about moms that way. And I think I know this isn't about me. I'm glad to have you on as a guest, but I couldn't help but share that because of what you said. I was thinking to myself, how on earth would I achieve something like that? Or what can I? And it's really interesting to think about it in those terms. And I think a lot of diabetes moms, what resonates with us is, oh, I'm the worst. I made a mistake. I'm failing my kid. I got a bad report card. It's all this negative talk. And that's a problem in and of itself. And you got other things to work on. You got to worry about, I'm succeeding. I'm great. You want to bring me to talk because I'm doing so well. It's so fascinating how we do this to ourselves.
And I think too, speaking to diabetes moms, which I love, and I think that's a demographic of people I never thought I would get to meet as intimately as I have. And, I think people like me and people who achieve are great to show to kids, because, hey, look at Rob. He's living his best life. He has a podcast. He talks about diabetes. He's not embarrassed. And I live for those moments where I can be the person that I needed when I was 16 years old. And have somebody who's accessible and wants to give back and wants to have those hard conversations and can say, you know what, I do see you, man. Like, you're 16, your mom doesn't know what's going on. You don't want to talk to her. And somehow I managed to remain young looking enough that I can communicate with somebody, hopefully.
The way you talk, you're like Methuselah. What are you, like 30?
I'm like 32. So yeah, I mean, I see, but Stacey, you're not on TikTok, right? If you put me on TikTok, I'd be so canceled. I can't dance. You know what I mean? I think for me, I just want to try to remain like as tuned into what people with diabetes are going through that they may not even be aware of. And I think this is in this sort of all the chronic things that we're juggling. I think chronic focus on achievement within some of the diabetes online community cultures is important for us to call out. And I think I've benefited from it. And it's important to me that I make sure to bring people in who maybe haven't benefited from it and use that to highlight important stories. Because what's crazy and surprised me, back to the podcast example, when I first started and I was really, really digging into what episodes are resonating with people, the one that was far and away the most resonant of my first 15 episodes was really the most simple, basic. It was a story of a type 1 mom and how she prepared for her first and second pregnancies with T1D. Wow. And, for me at the time, like a 27-year-old jock, tech bro, I was like, it was a great conversation. And my friend Lindsay, who's my friend in real life, did an amazing job. But I never would have guessed that would be the one that would have taken off of the first group. And it wasn't necessarily the achievers. It's the people who achieve in spite of there being no big reward publicly.
Yeah. Well, I think we need, and I know you'll agree with this, we need everybody in this community, right? We need the people who go up Mount Everest. We need the people sitting at the desk job. But what has resonated with my listeners is anybody they can learn from. And I think it's interesting. And especially at first, you want those high achieving, successful people, those Olympians and those rock stars, because as a parent of a kid, you can look at this person and say, okay, this person with type 1 is super successful. So my kid probably has a pretty good chance of being a mid-level executive, at Staples or whatever, right? They're going to be okay, or IBM. Whatever. Does IBM even exist anymore? I'll show my age. But, we do need those other people who have shown us how it's done. Something as complicated as a pregnancy with type 1 to something as simple as, it's not really that simple, but how did you transition from elementary school to middle school with your kid, right? Those are the things that we all want to learn. And I think what's really cool about social media and somebody like you who's, super big on Instagram and all that stuff is you get to show, as you said, the cool looking stuff, but it looks great, it looks perfect. But then it's also a chance to show all those crummy site changes and those days when you don't feel good, and you don't have to polish it all up. I mean, you just snap a picture or talk about it on Instagram and you do that all the time. I think it's great.
Yeah, it's new. I
Yeah.
think and I think maybe I've even mentioned it before in this pod, but in 2018 at ADA, I found this poster board study in the poster hall talking about the A1C outcomes and involvement in the diabetes online community.
Yeah.
I mean, just that sort of osmosis of encountering people with diabetes on a regular basis and the things that they do makes you better at diabetes. I don't know. It's normalizing. And I think that's what's so important and what the internet has brought. And I think even still, I'm even more learning about sort of the micro communities in diabetes where you're able to find people that look like you, people that are interested in the things that you're looking for. And otherwise, like, where would you find those people?
Yeah.
You go back to when Benny was diagnosed, you basically had the only people in your immediate area were the people that you could stay in contact with. Early blogs maybe kind of just starting to sprout. And now you can just go to some of these big diabetes accounts and search for people or look on the hashtag and look at the locations and say, oh, wow, there's somebody with diabetes there. I got to be a part of this really great campaign this summer with Express, a global brand, and
Oh yeah. Wait a second. Tell me about that, because that wasn't diabetes. You're like this. You were like a model. I mean, you
right.
were a model. What was that? That was amazing.
I guess I can put like published model on my resume now.
Definitely.
What's cool about that campaign, and first of all, the Express team was really great to work with. They're all pros. And I think just hearing sort of the creative outline of what they were trying to do as a person with diabetes, as a person with a disability, as a person with something that makes them different was just really cool to be there representing people with diabetes. So they sent out like a cold casting call. It had a bunch of stuff, as you know, or maybe not. Like, I'm very interested in fashion. I love, style is something that I don't know.
I've seen you post your outfits on Instagram. You're very well put together.
Fit pics are my thing. I love them. And my wife and I are currently, just having a turf war over who needs more closet space. And I will not lose. I will not lose that battle. I'm putting it on record. But the cool thing about Express was they said, hey, we're looking for people who are on Instagram, but it's not a requirement. We're looking for people who have some sort of social good or community tie, but it's not required. We're looking for people who have an interest in fashion, but it's not required. And I was like, wait a minute, I have all three of those things.
Yeah.
Let me like really try to get this. And so it was a cold call. I put together a pretty good application and response, and then I set it and forget it. And like, it was 90 days later until they got back to me, and I had sort of put it out of my mind. And they said, hey, Rob, like, we're really excited to have you part of this campaign. Like, can you talk on this day? And I was like, wait a minute, did I book it? And they said, yes. And so it was really cool to be able to, on a big panel, first of all, I was all over the world in Expresses. I mean, it was a year of COVID, obviously. So not as many people saw me, but like on the front page of express.com, very visible. And I was not just a model, I was representing myself. I was like Rob, like, hey, Rob is the Express model and he lives with diabetes.
No.
And that was something I had never experienced on a mainstream level before. It's one thing to go to these diabetes events and celebrate those all together, but to be different on a panel full of other amazing superstars, frankly, like, who have achieved way more than I have. I was there as a person with diabetes, and I got to talk about, like, at base level, what type 1 diabetes is, and talking about the insulin affordability and talking about what it's like to have an insulin pump attached to your body at all times.
Wow.
And to see people be like, wow, I had no idea about any of that, was just really cool to be a part of. And like, Tan France from Queer Eye was the host.
Yeah,
I'm just like sitting there like one-on-one with Tan France. It was unbelievable.
Was he nice?
Oh yeah. Oh, how could he? He was so giving.
He seems like the nicest guy.
An absolute pro. And I honestly, I've done a lot of interviews. I was admittedly not really super nervous for our conversation today because I know you and I figured it would be nice and easy, but I was like sweating bullets getting ready in this office in here for Tan France. I was like, what's my name? Like, what do I do? Just like to make sure I don't stumble, but it was a really awesome experience. I'm so grateful to have had the opportunity, and, hopefully it's the first of many.
That's awesome. I worked at Express when I was in college. I worked at the Express in the Carousel Center Mall in Syracuse. So if you shopped there in 1991 or 92, I helped you out. Not you, Rob. You're looking like you're looking through the time. You were not there in 1991 or 1992.
Well, the thing I was actually thinking about is my wife was born in Sherrill, New York. So
Oh,
she was born in 1991. So maybe her mom.
this call is over.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry. Technical difficulties. We're now cut off. But yes, my wife is younger than I am, which is
That's really
great.
funny.
And and that's a small world. I didn't know that you had the upstate New York tie.
Oh, yes. I went to Syracuse University, and then my first job was in Utica. And then I moved back to Syracuse for another job. And then I came to Charlotte, where I am now. I was up there for 10 years in the snow.
Oh man, very snowy, very
yeah.
cool.
But I grew up in New York, so not too far.
Really good.
Very different interview for me. I don't usually talk this much.
I like it though. It's like, I get to come on and I get to interview you a little bit.
Yeah. That's really funny about Express.
People were asking me like, so do you shop at Express? And I said, I haven't shopped there recently as much, but when I was getting my first job and I needed to get rid of my college bro clothes and like put on some real professional clothes, I went to Express. So it was like cool to be like, they're like, yeah, like that's a big part of the consumer that we're trying to reach. And, really people who have an interest in fashion, this is a first step for them. And it was cool to be I felt very seen and very, the team at Express was awesome.
That's terrific. Yeah. I worked there and then I got a job at a radio station in Syracuse. And then that was the end of that. Never looked back. I worked weekends at WSYR.
You found it. You found your lane.
I knew what I wanted to do. It was very cool. Are you going to be working on things like that? Is modeling something you would like to continue to pursue or the fashion industry?
Yeah.
TBD. I mean, you work in advertising, but
I do. That's not something being a model for Express wasn't on my vision board for 2020. But I don't know. It was cool. It was just to be a part of it, to, be in front of camera. Like you mentioned, work in advertising and have been parts of shoots like this, behind the camera and working on the campaign and working on the creative direction, but to be in front of the camera and kind of collaborate with people whose jobs I know intimately. And it was a very small crew because of COVID, and they came to Dallas, and it was cool to just be able to be in a small collaborative group of people who it was just the photographer, the director, and the videographer and myself. And we just got to hang out all day and talk about ideas and be creative. And so, yeah, I think I would love to do that again.
Nice. We've been talking for a long time. I didn't even ask you or congratulate you on your wedding, which happened this year.
Yes.
So congratulations on that. That's
Thank
lovely.
you. Big wife guy. Big fan of my wife.
Good to hear. Good to hear. What's up with you all in 2021? I mean, you're moving ahead with Medtronic, moving ahead with the ad agency. You are a married man. I mean, 2020 was a difficult year. Let's admit that. But anything on tap? I think I'm almost afraid to plan for 2021 in a way.
Me too. I don't want to get too far ahead of my skis. I think we are still a ways away of putting COVID completely behind us.
Sure.
And I also want to be very present in like what a tragedy it is. And I think even personally, within my friend group, there's been some very recent developments that are just awful. And so I think we need time to heal. And I think we need time to, mourn sort of our old selves, like it or not, one way or the other, we're all different because of 2020. And hopefully we can build sort of on the ashes of everything and be better to each other longer term. So we've got some cool projects. I think this question came from Peter from the Instagram story that I posted the other day. And, I have a cool series that I'm working on called More Than a Diabetic, which is going to be debuting next year. With some awesome community members. So that's up first. In terms of brand partnerships, obviously Medtronic, there's a couple other long-term partners that I've had that I want to do some deeper, cooler campaigns with. I'm sort of in I don't need new stuff. I really want to care for and sort of nurture my existing relationships and my existing, I don't know, whether partnerships or, I have a lot of irons in the fire. I don't need more irons. I need to just really focus on, my relationship with my wife, my relationship with my family, my two businesses, and really focusing on being a good steward of what we have and continuing to do right for people with diabetes.
That sounds like a great plan.
And have some fun,
Yeah, definitely. And hopefully we can see each other again and travel a little bit towards the end of the year. And I would just love that. That would be wonderful for me.
Yeah, if I want to manifest anything for 2021, I put my hands in the air because I'm manifesting. This is my manifesting.
Okay.
If you're listening, you're missing out. I want to go on a honeymoon with my wife in 2021. Oh. I would love that. That would be a fun thing. Travel. You got my wheels turning. I love to travel, and I have missed that. Sort of being held down at the house this year. So.
Excellent. Well, I hope we can do that. I'll keep you posted on anything I can help with. And thank you so much for spending some time with me, Rob. It's always fun to catch up, and you got me talking more than I usually do on these interviews, I think. But thank you.
I like that. I think that's just my inner interviewer. And, thank you for all the work that you put into Diabetes Connections. I think when you're a diabetes mom, there's so much work that goes into that anyway. And I just applaud people like you. And frankly, there aren't that many like you at this point. You've been doing this a long time and do a great job. So people who I hold you in high regard. I'll just leave it at that. You do a great job and I appreciate you.
Well, that's very kind. Thanks, Rob.